The title of this presentation is Farm Worker Activism on the West Side of the San Joaquin Valley. Thank you. I will speak of this during my talk today, but before I do so, I want to try to give you some context as to why is it that I chose to study this important subject of farm labor, and how does it relate to my current position as a full-time sociology instructor at West Hills Community College, Columbia. I was asked to give this presentation last year by Vice Chancellor of Education and Technology, Kelly Cooper. I felt humbled after reading her email. I shared it with my mentors and advisors, but if I'm honest, I was scared. Not scared of the presentation itself, but more so who I was going to be presenting to. I am a graduate of West Hills College. This past semester, I was asked by various students in different classes what my dream job is. I responded to them by saying, the one I currently have. My students' face after I said this is priceless. Some of the students couldn't believe or understand how I could be happy. I'm sure many of you in this classroom today know that there are these instances in the classroom in which you can see it in the students' eyes when a certain concept or a theory clicks, and the words that come out of their mouths or the words that they write on a piece of paper shortly thereafter is just beautiful because they're learning. That's the goal of being in this institution. I was a young and confused student when I stepped into the classroom here at West Hills College, Coalinga, and Lemoore. I have had the privilege of taking classes with many amazing instructors, many of whom are my colleagues here today. My time at West Hills College was a crucial time in my life when I came to the realization that I was hungry for knowledge, but also that I needed to leave Coalinga in order to continue this journey. Although I had the ambition of obtaining an education, I did not understand what that would entail as a first-generation college student. Growing up, my parents, my mother in particular, would always tell me to remember where I came from. So when I transferred to a university from West Hills College, I always had this on my mind. I now, once again, live in Coalinga. But before this, I remember making the drive back into town to visit my family and friends or attending a community event. And I couldn't help but stare out the window at these endless fields that make up the San Joaquin Valley. And I would think about my upbringing. Considering our location in California's Central Valley, I think it is very important for us to speak from this reality. I grew up in a farm worker community. People in the summer would wake up before the break of dawn so they could work before the heat forced them out of the agricultural fields. And although they labored long hours, they earned very little. This is a sad fact, when in 2018 alone, California agriculture produced $56 billion. These numbers are enormous, but we need to remember that farm workers helped in generating these billions. These farm workers are very important because they work the land, they pick the crops, and for without them, you and I would not eat. There is a very famous quote by Isaac Newton. I'm sure many of you have heard it before. It goes, "If I have seen a little further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." This quote resonates with me because in order for me to contextualize my decision to study farm labor, you need to know a little bit about my family. My grandfather, Regino Torres, left his home state of Guanajuato in Mexico in the early 1960s to come to the United States when he was around 18 or 19 years old as a bracero. For those not familiar with this term, bracero is a Spanish term which can be defined loosely as one who works with his arms. Braceros were the name given to participants in the Bracero program. The program was created in 1942 as a bilateral agreement between the United States government and the Mexican government, in which Mexican laborers would be able to travel to the United States to supplement the lack of farm workers due to the U.S.'s interest in World War II. Oftentimes, these farm workers were paid below the wages promised and treated horribly. As you can see in the pictures here on the left, these are men participating in the bracero programs are being fumigated as they're entering the United States. On the picture on the right, you can see the braceros working with the shorthand hoe, also called by Mexican workers el cortito, meaning they would have to spend the majority of their day bent. El cortito was eventually banned from California fields in 1975. The bracero program lasted until 1964. During this time, 4.6 million agricultural workers participated in the program. But back to my grandpa's story. My grandfather first arrived in Salinas. After the season, he returned to Mexico only to join the bracero program once more out of financial insecurity. The second time he came to work the agricultural fields in the San Joaquin Valley. My grandfather worked the agricultural fields around Coringa and Avenal. After the bracero program ended in 1964, he applied and was granted a visa and returned to Coringa. By the late 1970s, the majority of my uncles and aunts, whom you see on the right side here, all legally joined my grandfather in Coringa. Although our family was together in the U.S., growing up was difficult, especially when you are poor and immigrant. My community consisted of newly arrived immigrants from the Mexican border towns of Tijuana and Mexicali. The majority of my community members, like my family, labored in the fields. My friends from the community grew up with a very similar childhood as I. Poverty, drugs, and cholo glorification was prevalent in my neighborhood. But so was the belief that education was important. When I was in high school, I was enrolled in the All Youth One System program. That was part of the Workforce Connection. I was labeled an at-risk youth, in danger of falling into the various paths brought about by poverty, lack of access to resources, and violence. If you look closely at the picture, you may be able to see a familiar face. Upon entering the All Youth One System program, I met Brian Boomer. This is a young Brian Boomer. You're still young, Brian. You're still young. I met him shortly after he had returned from studying in Nevada. Brian, as well as the rest of the staff at the Workforce Connection, were and continue to be amazing human beings who continue to encourage me to not give up. This program helped me tremendously. It kept me busy and off the streets. I had the opportunity to meet and interact with educated people. People who not only looked like me, but also came from a very similar upbringing. Being in this program gave me some direction and hope that I would not have to work in the agricultural fields like my family. Not to say that it's bad to work in the agricultural fields, because it's an honorable thing to do, to feed the world. Upon graduating from Coringa High School, I was encouraged by my cousin, Laura, and my caseworker, Anna, to enroll in college. At the time, I was working part-time at McDonald's and finally agreed to enroll in some college classes. But before the start of the fall semester, I was encouraged, actually I was more pressured than anything, by my cousin and Anna to enroll in the Certified Nurse Assistant program here at West Hills College. I still remember Anna telling me that completing the program could help me and my family financially as I completed my general education at the college. Keep in mind, I had no idea what a Certified Nurse Assistant was. So I started the program in the summer, and soon after I completed the program and I got a job at then Coringa Regional Medical Center, tending for residents and helping them complete tasks I had taken for granted all my life. The job was humbling and made me realize how lucky I was to be alive and healthy. In the next 2 years, I worked a graveyard shift at the hospital and another shift as a full-time student at the college. With the help and support of the student support services, library staff, the camp program, EOPS, counselors, instructors, I was able to obtain my AA. Here's some pictures from the CNA program. I was the only guy in the program, so they took every opportunity to put me, dress me up, and use me as an example. The amazing Jan Morris taught this course. She had us write 3 things that we wanted to get out of the class. My goals are on the screen here. Fortunately, not only did I reach these goals, but my writing also improved. After graduating from West Hills College, I transferred over to Sacramento State. Sacramento State is a beautiful campus. It's like a huge park. There are trees everywhere, and the American River passes right next to it. And also, there are a lot of wild turkeys. I feel very blessed to be able to go here. I felt like it was healing for my soul. I was able to ride my bike every day down the American River path, cross the Guy West Bridge, and go to class. It was a beautiful thing, beautiful time of my life. But I was still a little confused, not knowing what I wanted to do. So I arrived at Sac State as a sociology major, not sure what I wanted to do. I was fortunate though, I met some amazing faculty and who are still very good friends and mentors of mine today, like Manuel Barajas and Elia Ramirez, both of whom encouraged me and my hunger for knowledge. During my senior year, I decided to pick up another major because I didn't know what I was going to do when I graduated. I could not find a job. Luckily, I found out about the McNair Scholars Program, which is a federally funded program meant to help first-generation college students who come from marginalized backgrounds to prepare them for graduate school by helping them conduct independent research. It took me a while to figure out what I wanted to research. For some time, I wanted to write something that people would find interesting, but it wasn't until I had a conversation with my uncle Gabriel that he told me, write about your reality. Write about where you come from. So I started to research the history of farm labor, the working conditions for them, and the inequalities that exist that make it more difficult for them to obtain an education. I ended up writing a paper titled From the Fields to College, an Analysis of College Aspirations Among Latino Farm Workers. I found that all participants that I interviewed valued education and wanted to obtain a degree, but unfortunately, due to the lack of access and knowledge of resources, this was not possible. Participants who had attended an institution of higher education also claimed to have participated in a college-bound or college preparatory program, such as Student Support Services, the College Assistant Migrant Program, EOPS, Upward Bound, and AVID, many of which we have here on this campus, in this district. In addition, I also found out that farm work is one of the most dangerous occupations in the nation, and it has some of the highest fatalities of any occupation. Farm workers are one of the most economically disadvantaged groups in the nation, with over half of its workforce being undocumented. Lastly, that foreign workers were one of the only groups of workers to be excluded from the National Labor Relations Act of 1935. The National Labor Relations Act was meant to give workers protection in the workforce and the right to form/join a union. After graduating from Sacramento State with 2 BAs, one in sociology and the other one in ethnic studies with an emphasis in Chicano studies, I got into the master's program there at Sac State, and I completed a year. Shortly after, my advisor Barajas told me to apply to the PhD program at UC Merced in sociology. I did. I was blessed to be accepted, and I started making my way back home. This was a life changer. I was able to come closer to my family and to my community, to my friends, people who I had drifted away from. And I continued to do research on farm labor in the United States. The history of farm workers in the U.S. is very interesting. The usage of indentured servants, as mentioned earlier, and enslaved people to the importation of foreign laborers is what made the agricultural industry function in this country. Get a little scholarly, but there's certain things, right, that I found out in the research was scholars say that there's 3 different ways of organizing amongst farm workers early 20th century, from 1930 to about 1942, 46 to 51. What I want to talk about is organizing here in the Valley in particular. In California, the strikes of 1933 were some of the largest agricultural strikes in this country's history. These strikes took place in most of the Central Valley in cities like Pixley and Corcoran. It is estimated by some scholars that up to 47,000 workers participated in the strike. It is said that the great American author John Steinbeck used this strike as the basis for many of his stories. Farm worker organizing picked up once again after the ending of the Bracero program in 1964. The Delano Grape Strike of 1965 started with the Agricultural Workers Organizational Committee struck grape growers demanding better wages. It is important to note that the AWOC was made up of Filipino workers and led by Filipino lariat law. This is unfortunately left out of the many historical accounts about this strike. It wasn't until a week later that Cesar Chavez and the National Workers Association joined the strike. Shortly after, the Agricultural Workers Organization Committee and the National Workers Association collaborated for the Delano Grape Strike. They formed the United Farm Workers Organizing Committee and soon after were renamed the United Farm Workers. The UFW used the knowledge it had obtained from previous farm working organizing campaigns to organize farm workers in the field. The UFW's mobilizing efforts culminated in the passage of the Agricultural Labor Relations Act of 1975. The passage of this act, at least on paper, gave the UFW hope that for the first time in the history of the United States, legislation explicitly recognized farm worker rights to organize and join a union. Part of the reason for this mobilizing efforts by the UFW and other organizations was the living and working conditions of these workers. In this quote taken by a book titled Lettuce Wars, we read about the living conditions of farm workers in Huron, California, which is about 15 minutes away from here. It states, in one corner of the room, old mattresses were stacked and piled next to a stack of rough, thin blankets and coarse materials to use as sheets. The barracks sat in a dirt yard that turned marshy and with a downpour, so that we had to slosh through mud to go from barracks to the bathroom to mess hall. It was important to keep the floors in any of these places clean. It was impossible. And so we got used to shuffling in the mud inside and out. The organizing efforts by the United Farm Workers were rampant throughout the state of California. As can be seen here in El Malcriado, a UFW newspaper meant to give people information about farm worker mobilizing throughout the state and nation. In this 1974 edition of El Malcriado, the story of farm workers striking at Papas & Co. on July 20th, claiming they were being cheated of their wages is told. The article goes on to say that the workers picketed the establishment and were soon thereafter sprayed by a water truck. This sort of organizing efforts was happening in rural communities throughout the San Joaquin Valley. Another example of these organizing efforts is the campaign that happened here close to Colinga at La Cuesta Verde, which at the time was the 25th or 24th largest farm operator in the state. This organizing campaign took place from 1985 to 1986. The result was the workers received certification of their union from the state. The photo on the screen is a picture of some of the main organizers, some of whom still live in Colinga today. But just because the United Farm Workers were able to pass the Agricultural Labor Relations Act in 1975 does not mean that the conditions that they were fighting to improve for farm workers were eradicated. In the state of California today, the California Department of Agriculture states that agribusiness made $54 billion in 2018. There is an estimated 829,000 farm workers in the state. The average pay for farm worker nationwide is roughly $11.84. This varies depending on whether the farm worker is getting paid hourly or by piece rate. Agricultural work is oftentimes seasonal, meaning workers are constantly looking for employment. But in 2016, the AB 1066 passed in the state of California, which gave farm workers overtime pay after 9.5 hours, or after working 55 hours a week. In Fresno County, according to the U.S. Census, Fresno County has a population of 994,400 people. Out of this population, it is estimated that 21.1% of the population lives in poverty. According to UC Davis professor Philip Martin, Fresno County has around 96,000 farm workers. Now remember, according to the United States Department of Agriculture, farm workers are one of the most economically disadvantaged groups in the nation. Considering that education is often seen as the great equalizer, it is important to look at how farm workers and the children of farm workers perform in education. According to the National Center for Farm Worker Health, 1/3 of child farm workers drop out before graduating high school. This is a result of constant economic strain and migrating from one location to the next for employment. This results in children not being able to complete their schooling, so it is no surprise for their low educational attainment. Some of the obstacles that farm workers face in education, in particular with access to higher education in rural communities, is the distance to institutions of higher ed, transportation to get to this location, access to internet, and childcare. An article about how a high school district in the Coachella Valley was providing internet on buses for students who live in these rural communities. On this page here. Today, this is nothing new, right? Most public transportations, vehicles have Wi-Fi, but many individuals who live in these rural areas still do not have access to internet or have a reliable internet, making it difficult for them to complete their work. Additionally, the work schedules farm workers have is unique. They often work long hours, and depending on the season and the crop they are picking, it could mean they are working a night shift or early morning, which can make coming to class very difficult. So to wrap up, farm workers are one of the most economically disadvantaged groups in the nation. The economic instability of this group makes their life stressful. Not only is it difficult for farm workers to get an education, but also for the children of farm workers, because they also have to deal with the stressful situation as well. The stress of having to worry about how they will pay rent, where they will work after a crop ends, how they will put food on the table, has detrimental effects on this population. Stress is a huge killer in the United States. The effects caused by stress for this group of people are manifested in the group's educational attainment rates, health, both physical and mental, and outlook on life. This is why, considering we are located in a rural area in California, we need to understand our student population. I am not advocating to give students a passing grade because they belong to this population, but rather, we as instructors try to be empathetic of our students' situation and try to work with them because we are all part of this community. Now, this wasn't part of the original speech, but earlier today I got a phone call from a really good friend of mine. She is an instructor, a middle school instructor in Fresno. She told me that one of her students died this morning. The student was 11 years old. I tried to console her, but you know what? I couldn't find the words. I mean, what can I say? What would you say? My friend is an amazing teacher. I hope to be half of a great instructor as she is. She has taught me that I, as an instructor, need to be more understanding of our students and look beyond the physical, because we do not know what people are going through. Today has been a reminder of that. I want to thank you all for listening to me today and ask you to take some time to think about where your food is coming from. And also, thank you once more for the amazing work that you are doing here at the college to change the lives of not just the students, but the students' families and communities, because this is amazing, life-changing work that oftentimes we don't give ourselves credit for. Thank you.